Welcome to Life Podcast as we journey through the Bible. And this week we are in Matthew chapter 8. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who joined in from last week. I started with Matthew chapter 1, and today we are in chapter 8. And chapter 8 starts with Jesus healing a man with leprosy. And he's coming down the mountain. Remember from chapter 5, he was teaching all through chapter 7. And then now he's coming down the mountain. So it says, large crowds followed Jesus as he came down the mountainside. And then suddenly, a man with leprosy approached him and knelt before him. Remember that leprosy was a disease that people did not want to be associated with, and those who had it were kept aside. So, and the man said to Jesus, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. And Jesus reached out and touched him. So Jesus is, first of all, he was not afraid of touching this man just because he had leprosy. So he goes ahead and touches him and says, I am willing. So no matter what that you're going through, Jesus is willing to heal your diseases and anything else that you're going through. So he's willing. And he said, I am willing, he said, be healed. And immediately the leprosy disappeared. Then Jesus said to him, don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest and let him examine you and take along the offering required by the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. Just let's pause there. Why did Jesus tell him to do this? Well, Life Application Bible Study says that the law required a healed leper to be examined by the priest. This is found in Leviticus chapter 14. And Jesus wanted this man to give his story firsthand to the priest to prove that his leprosy was completely gone, so that he could be restored to his community. So that is the reason why Jesus told him to go to the priest to examine him, so that he can be restored to the community. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed. Okay. And then immediately after that, Jesus returned to Capernaum. And now in Capernaum, he meets a Roman officer and pleaded with him, Lord, my young servant lies in bed, paralyzed and in terrible pain. The Roman officer, first of all, is not a Jew, he's a Gentile. And he's telling Jesus he has a young officer who is sick, who is paralyzed and in great pain. And you'd imagine that Jesus, the fact that this Roman officer was a Gentile, maybe Jesus would put him off, but Jesus didn't do that. Instead, Jesus said, I will come and heal him. But the officer said, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come into my home. Okay? Just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. Because this is a Roman officer, and he knew that when he gave orders, everyone followed what he said. I know this because I am under authority to my superior officers, and I have authority over my soldiers. So he knew how everything went down. I only need to say go, and they go, come, and they come. And if I say to my slaves, do this, they do it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Like, this guy he knows protocol. Turning to those who were following him, he said, I tell you the truth, I haven't seen faith in this. I haven't seen faith like this in all Israel. Imagine that. And I tell you this, that many Gentiles will come from all over the world. Remember, Gentiles were anyone that was not a Jew. So Jesus says that many Gentiles will come from all over the world, from east and west, and sit down with Abraham, Isaac and Jacob at the feast of the kingdom of heaven. But many Israelites, those for whom the kingdom was prepared, will be thrown out into outer darkness while they'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So Jesus is basically saying that he did not just come for the Jews, he came also for the Gentiles. And he's foretelling of what will happen in the future, that the Gentiles will also go to heaven and will be part of the great feast that will happen in heaven. And then Jesus said to the Roman officer, go back home because you believed, it has happened. As in your faith, the level of your faith has made your servant whole. And the young servant was healed at that very hour. The very hour that the Roman officer was talking to Jesus, the servant was healed because of his faith. One of the things that we can learn through here is that the Roman officer was a leader, and because he was a leader, he cared for those who were beneath him. So that also, for us as leaders and anyone who's in leadership position, you should care for the people who are behind you or beneath you, taking care of their personal needs, so that they don't feel like you are just here and they're here and you don't care about their everyday needs. So let's care of everyone. And the next one, Jesus heals many people. When Jesus arrived at Peter's house, so he went to Peter. Peter is one of Jesus' disciples. So he arrived at Peter's house and he finds Peter's mother-in-law was sick and in bed with a high fever. So Peter was Jesus and he's a disciple of Jesus, so he's not exempted for him or any of his family members not being sick. But when Jesus touched her hand, the fever left her, and then she got up and prepared a meal for him. And then that evening, many demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus, and he cast out evil spirits. So Jesus has the power to cast out demons and evil spirits with a simple command, and he healed all the sick. And this fulfilled the word of the Lord through the prophet Isaiah. This is in Isaiah 53. He took all our sicknesses and removed our diseases. Okay, so by Jesus performing these miracles, it fulfilled what Isaiah said in Isaiah 53 verse 4. Again, God's word is true and God's word always comes to pass. So let's just correlate this with Life Application Bible Study in Matthew 8:16, and it says, Matthew continues to show Jesus' kingly nature through a single touch. Jesus healed in verse 8, 3, and 15. When he spoke a single word, evil spirits fled his presence. Jesus also has authority over all evil powers with all earthly disease. He also has power and authority to conquer sin. Sickness and evil are consequences of living in a fallen world, so that's why there's sickness. But in the future, when God removes all sin, there will be no more sickness, no more death. And then Jesus' healing miracles were a taste of what the whole world will one day experience in God's kingdom. So Jesus is just showing us that a time is coming, there will be no more sickness, no more death, no more pain, and everything is going to be perfect. So let's go on. We're now in verse 18, and it says the cost of following Jesus. What is the cost of following Jesus? When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. Then one of the teachers of religious law said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." But Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens to live in, and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head." Sometimes when Jesus talks, you think he makes you think. He was not shallow, he was very deep. So let's just check, what did Jesus mean when he said foxes have dens to live and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head? And this is chapter 8 verse 20. I use Life Application Bible Study. So it basically says following Jesus is not always easy or comfortable. Okay, often it means great cost and sacrifice. There's a sacrifice and a great cost in following Jesus Christ, with no earthly rewards. Don't expect an earthly reward or security. Jesus didn't have a place to call home because this earth is not his home. You may find that following Christ costs you popularity, it costs you friendships, it costs you leisure time or treasured habits. Okay, but while the cost of following Jesus Christ is high, the value of being his disciple is even higher. Discipleship is an investment that lasts for eternity and yields incredible rewards. Okay, there is we will lose a lot while following Jesus, but there's a reward in heaven. Okay? And then he goes on and says, another of these disciples said, Lord, first let me return home and bury my father. Wow. And Jesus told him, follow me now, let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. If you read that in a layman's perspective, you'd imagine like, hey, Jesus is being rude. Why doesn't he allow this guy just to go and bury his own father? And Life Application Bible Study says this. It is possible that this disciple was not asking permission to go to his father's funeral, but rather to put off following Jesus until his elderly father died. Like he was putting Jesus on hold. Perhaps he was the firstborn son and wanted to be sure to claim his inheritance. Perhaps he didn't want to face his father's wrath if he left the family business, okay, to follow an itinerant preacher, okay. Whether his concern was financial security, family approval, or something else, he did not want to commit himself to Jesus just yet. Jesus, however, will not accept this excuse. So that is why he tells him, let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. So Jesus, it goes on to say, Jesus was always direct with those who wanted to follow him. Like, this is what it's going to cost you. Take it or leave it. He made sure they counted the cost and set aside any conditions they might have for following him. As God's son, Jesus did not hesitate to demand complete loyalty. Even family loyalty was not to take priority over the demands of obedience. His direct challenge forces us to ask ourselves about our own priorities in following him. The decision to follow Jesus should not be put off, even though other loyalties compete for our attention. Nothing should be placed above a total commitment to living for him. So it's a choice that we have to make to totally be committed to God, be committed to Jesus, no matter what the cost. And then next we see Jesus calming the storm. So what happened is Jesus got into the woods together with his disciples and started across the lake. And then suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with waves breaking into the woods. Of course, the disciples were now afraid. But Jesus was sleeping. And the disciples went to wake him up because now they were afraid. And the Bible records that they were shouting, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. So here we see that the disciples had fear. They had allowed fear to control them. And then Jesus responded, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. Like he's telling them, I am with you. I am with you in this boat. Nothing can harm you. Nothing is going to happen to you. And then if you pause just for a minute, as a believer, we all go through hard times and trials and situations that we wonder in what's going to happen next, because maybe the pain or whatever situation you're in is like a storm that it's not ending. But Jesus, just like he was with the disciples, he's telling you, I'm here. I am here with you. So do not fear, do not be afraid. Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. And the disciples were amazed. Who is this man? They asked. Even the waves and the winds obey him. So Jesus has power over nature. Okay. And then next we see Jesus healing two demon-possessed men. Remember as we started in verse 14, he also healed people who were demon-possessed. And also here we see him healing people who were demon-possessed. When Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake, in the region of Gadarenes, two men who were possessed by demons met him. So this is a region whereby these men were so violent because the demons in them were like stronghold and powerful. So people were not passing there. Okay. So these men came out of the tombs and were so violent that no one could go through that area. and they began screaming at him. These are the demons screaming through the man at Jesus. And they said, "Why are you interfering with us? Why are you interfering with us?" Us is plural, so the demons here were many. "Why are you interfering with us, Son of God?" Pause there. The demons are calling Jesus Son of God. Yet the Pharisees could not even acknowledge that Jesus is the Son of God. So it just goes to show that demons know who Jesus is, and they called him out, Son of God. Okay? Have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time? So the demons know there is a time for them to be tortured. There's an appointed time for them to be tortured. So they're asking Jesus, have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time? And there happened to be a large herd of pigs that were there, sitting at a distance. So the demons begged Jesus to cast them out so that they can go to the pigs. And that's exactly what Jesus did. If you cast the begs and said, "If you cast us out, send us into the herd of pigs." "All right, go," Jesus commanded them. So the demons came out of the men and entered the pigs, and the whole herd plunged into the lake, and they drowned. And the herdsman fled to the nearby town, telling everybody what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And then the entire town came to meet Jesus, and they begged him to leave, and they begged him to go away and leave them alone. You'd imagine that since they weren't passing this place, and Jesus had cast the demons in this man, they should have welcomed him, but instead they wanted him gone. They didn't want anything to do with him. And just like that, we are done with Matthew chapter 8, just 34 verses, talking about Jesus' power over nature, Jesus' power over healing. And there are many lessons that we can learn, okay? And one of the lessons that we can learn, and we've learned here, is Jesus has power to heal all our diseases, and he is willing to heal us. He is willing to make us whole. Another lesson is the Roman officer cared enough for the people who are beneath him. And so we too should learn and take care of each other, even if it means going a long way or out of the way to help another person. And then when Jesus helped the Roman officer, he goes to show that he didn't just come for the Jews. He also came for the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are part of God's big plan. And then we see another prophecy that was written in Isaiah 54 coming to pass. Isaiah prophesied about the coming of the Messiah, and then that he will heal our diseases. So that prophecy has been fulfilled. And then there's a cost. There's a cost in following Jesus Christ. We will lose popularity, we might lose family, we might lose friendships, but there is a reward. There is a reward that each and every one of us will get. Those who manage and stay strong to the very end, there will be a reward for you in heaven. And then true discipleship in Jesus is an investment. And you know, an investment is not something that you invest today and earn tomorrow. An investment is a long time. You have to invest for a long time for you to earn rewards. So just as the way you can invest here on earth, by following Jesus, you're investing for your future, and that is eternity in heaven with Jesus Christ. And then Jesus' power over nature becomes the storm, and the demons know Jesus, and they know who he is, and the demons also know that there's a time for them, there's a time for them to be tormented that will come. And we're done with Matthew chapter 8, and I will see you again tomorrow as we discuss Matthew chapter 9. God bless you.